Okay. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Um, Today we're going to continue, maybe even finish this first chapter of the Fundamentals of the Torah. All right. Just a brief review of the things that we spoke about recently. So we said the most fundamental principle which everything relies on is that there is a primary being, right? And this primary being, we said, well, okay, so the primary being, which means he brings everything into existence, right? All other realities. And his reality is the only absolute reality. All others are relative realities. And from there, we went on to say that also truth is the only thing that actually truly exists. So even truth is relative. It's relative to the reality above it, right? The ultimate truth, or the ultimate true being that primary being, which we later established as our Lord or God, our supreme authority over us and all of humanity, right? Meaning authority itself is relative, right? You can have the authority of a father in the household, right? Which is relative to the authority of the city and or the state, which is relative to the authority of the country or the king, who is relative to the authority of the Torah, which is God. He is the ultimate source of authority. And then we spoke about how, since there are different realms of existence, right? And God is the only thing that exists on his realm of existence. He is the ultimate one. Even the concept of unity is relative, right? For instance, all living creatures, there are many different species. There's one species that is unique. And out of that, there are many different, let's say, peoples or nations. There is one, one nation in the land, right? And from there, okay, but they can also be divided. They're divided into individuals. So are they one? So you get relative to the nation, an individual is one. However, an individual can also be further divided, right? And so even the concept of one in unity is a relative concept. In relation to God, we are not one. God is one. What does that mean that God is one? Well, really, it doesn't really mean that he is one in the way that we are accustomed to thinking of one as a number, as maybe first in like a mathematical series. No, that's not God's one. Other pagan nations also have a one God that's either divided into three, or there were many gods that fought a war against each other, and only one remained victorious over the others. It says, when we say God is one, it's really for an absence of a better term. He's not really one in the way we're thinking of the number one. He is one because nothing else exists other than him, at least on his realm of existence. And if nothing else exists, then there is only him. And if he has no, and we saw how he has an infinite source of energy, or he is an infinite source of energy, and therefore he can't be confined in any physical form, and therefore he can't be one. And so if he can't be confined in any physical form, and therefore he can't be anything other than one, then neither can he be divided or subtract or added to, right? And really nothing that relates to physical form is applicable to him, right? So there's no size, there's no mass, so there's no direction, there's no up and down, there's no left and right. Anything that we are accustomed to thinking of because we are confined to physical form doesn't apply to God. And we said this is a mitzvah to understand this, mitzvah aseh, right? When you say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohenu, right? Adonai, our God, Elohenu, Adonai, Echad, is one. This is a mitzvah to be contemplating about this, to think about the unity / the singularity of God. Okay, so now that we at least established this, we'll say philosophically in our minds, it says, Harei mefurash b'Torah u'banavi she'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu guf u'gviya. It says it's already explicit in the Torah itself and also in the books of the prophets that God has no physical form. Shene'emar, as it says, Ki Adonai Elohechem hu ha'elohim b'shamayim mima'al ve'al ha'aretz mitachat. He says, God, He is the Lord in the heavens and above, and on the earth and below. Ve'haguf lo yeh b'shnei mekomot. Right? And a physical body, a physical form, cannot be in different locations. He said a physical event is defined by its coordinates on the X, Y, Z axis, or X, Y, Z, and T, also in time, right? Length, depth, height, right? Those are X, Y, Z, and T being time. And it can exist in two different places in time simultaneously. And it also says, says, you have not seen any image of God. Who can you compare me to? And kind of make like an analysis, an analogy between me and something else. ואילו היה גוף, היה דומה לשאר גופים. And if God was within a physical form, then it could be compared some way because it would be similar to any other physical form. You'd say, okay, it's the shape of a circle, just like 1,000,000 times bigger than the world. Or it's the shape of this. There is some sort of comparison. There is some sort of way to correlate between him and another physical form. He takes up X, Y, Z, and T. Just his X, Y, Z, and T's are much bigger. So it says, who can you compare me to? And make a relation between me and them. So it says, this is said in Ishaya. So if there's no way to compare him to anything, then he has no physical form. So if so, im ken, mahu ze shene'emar b'Torah tachat raglav. So why does the Torah explicitly talk about God's feet? It says under his feet, under his legs. It says Kema'aseh livnat hasapir. It was a vision of the aristocracy of Bnei Israel after Ma'aman Har Sinai. They said v'tachat raglav kema'aseh livnat hasapir. They saw an image of this sapphire under the legs of God. It says ketuvim be'etzba Elohim, right? The 10 Commandments, the 2 tablets, were described as written by the finger of God. God has legs, He has a finger, Yad Hashem, He has a hand, Einei Hashem, He has eyes, Oznei Hashem, He has ears, V'chayoseh b'devarim halal. Right? And all these kind of different descriptions of God's, so to speak, body parts. It says, Hakol lefi da'atan shel bnei adam. Right? This is only for the sake of man. Why is it for the sake of man? She'inan mekirin ela hagufot. Right? We can only think in physical, material terms. In order to break out of this way of thinking, it really requires a lot of training. The masses, say 90, maybe even 99% of people, maybe even more, are unable to think in non-material terms. It says, the Torah was given to man so that man can study it and understand it. And so the Torah needs to speak in a language that can relate, that man can relate to. So this is the language of man, right? If you're going to tell me God doesn't have eyes, God doesn't have ears, God can't hear what I'm saying. So if the Torah would say, no, God doesn't have any ears or eyes, people would think that God is deaf and God is blind. Because we, as people, everything we know around us, if it hears, it has ears. If it sees, it has eyes. So obviously God has ears and eyes, right? Now this is just the way the Torah speaks to us so that we can relate to God. V'hakol kinuin. This is, but all of these terms, etzba, regel, yad, right? The finger, the legs, the hand, the eyes, the ears, they are all kinuin. They're all like code terms even. In fact, the whole first section of, I don't like calling it Maimonides' philosophical work, but what's known as Maimonides' philosophical work, the guide to the perplexed, the whole first section is like a dictionary and like a key to decode these words when they're brought in prophecies or in the Torah. When it says regel, right, the legs of God, what is it referring to? What does that mean? God doesn't have legs. So when it says the legs of God, what's it talking about? Moshe ne'emar, right? And it says, Im shanuti berak harbi, right? It says if I change, I'm gonna sharpen, if you anger me, I'm gonna sharpen my my sword. Does God have a sword? Does God need to kill with a sword? He says, no, this is a mashal. This is an allegory. Same way that God kills without a sword, yet he's described as sharpening his sword. It's just an image, an allegory to mean something. So too, all these other terms, the eyes of God, the ears of God, right? These are all just a mashal. It's just an allegory. Kol mashal, all of it. All of it is just an allegory. They are all code terms to a deeper understanding of the Torah. By the way, they have specific meanings, right? When it says regel, it means something. Not legs. It means something now. Something that needs to be studied. It says re'ayah l'davar zeh, okay, and proof of this, שנביא אחד אומר שראה הקדוש ברוך הוא לבושה כתלג חיוור. Like one prophet, this is Daniel, when he perceived God, he says he was white like snow. ואחר ראהו Hamus begadim Bosra. And another one saw him, he had like reddish clothing from Basra. Moshe Rabbeinu Asmo, and Moshe himself, when he perceived God in his prophetic vision, so at the splitting of the sea, he perceived God as a fierce warrior waging war. Sinai, and at Sinai itself, he saw Moshe. Moshe perceived God kishliach sibur atuf, as the Hazan in the Beit Knesset, wrapped in his prayer song, in his talet. Lomar she'enu demut v'sura. All this comes to show that God has no form, he has no imagery. אלא הכל במראה הנבואה ובמחזים. Each perception of each prophet in his vision, right? So his vision of God is in accordance to his prophecy, to whatever vision, whatever message God is communicating to that prophet. And all these descriptions have meaning to them. The amitat davar, right? But the truth of the matter, the oneness, the singularity of the unity of God, in da'ato shel adam, right? To understand it fully and deeply as it is, that you can say, I know this topic, ask me anything. I fully comprehend this topic, and דעתו של אדם יכולה להשיגו ולחוקרו. Right? The mind of man is too limited to fully comprehend this. Nobody, even Moshe, could not really get to the bottom of this. וזהו שאמר הכתוב, החקר אלוה תמצא, says, you want to investigate God and reach God and understand him. Says it says you have to go back all the way to the tachlit, the purpose, the primary being, in order to get that, which is impossible because we cannot reach that. Okay, so if so, well, we see Moshe. I think this question was brought up last week, right? What is it that Moshe asked when he said, show me your glory? Right? What did Moshe try to understand, try to achieve when he said to God, so show me your glory. Reveal your full glory to me. It says, ביקש לידע אמיתת המסעות של הקדוש ברוך הוא, עד שיהיה ידוע בליבו, כמו ידיעת אחד מן האנשים שראה פניו, ונחקקה סברתו בקדמו. So what does that mean? הראני נא את כבודך. It says, Moshe Rabbeinu says he was on the highest level of human intellect. He perfected human intellect as much as humanly possible. And at his stage, he asked God, can you show me your glory, your full glory? He wanted to have a full understanding and comprehension of God as it is. He says, similar to a person knowing a person by face. Right? You know, you see people from afar, maybe you recognize them, maybe you don't recognize them. Maybe you see them from the side, from behind, from afar. You can tell maybe by the way a person walks, by the way, you know, he moves, by his body language. You could sometimes, you know, realize that this is a friend of yours. Right? Because you know your friend. You see how he walks. However, it's not 100 with 100% certainty that this is actually him. It could be someone else. You're not sure. But when you see his face, when you're face to face with your friend, you know it's him beyond a doubt. It says this is the kind of understanding that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted regarding the existence of God and the existence / unity of God. שנמצא אותו האיש נפרד בדעתו משאר האנשים, right? Because then it says when you come face to face, you know beyond any doubt, with absolute certainty, the difference between this person and this friend of yours and someone else. כך ביקש משה רבנו להיות מציאת הקדוש ברוך הוא נפרדת בליבו משאר מציאת הנמצאים. He wanted to be able to understand God not in context with the rest of creation, but on its own, right? Because we say there's different levels of reality. There's the one where we are all in, all of creation exists in, and there's the level of God, which is transcendent to all of that, which has no creations in it. He wanted to understand God on that deepest level, you know, without the context of everything else. So he knows exactly how God is. Is this understood? And it's complicated, it's difficult, I'm aware. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. והשיבו ברוך הוא שאין כוח בדעת האדם החי שהוא מחובר מגוף ונפש להשיג אמיתת דבר זה על בוריו. It says, and God responded to him that man, being a living being composed of a physical form, of a body and a nefesh. We'll learn more about the nefesh later. For now, we'll say man's intellect and knowledge, right? Being composed of these two things, it is impossible for man to really fully comprehend this. Right? Because man can only perceive in physical terms. All men. Right?
Would it be correct?
Sorry?
I'm sorry. Wait, a question.
Yes.
Would it be correct? Would it be correct then, or is it correctly understood that Moses wanted the full knowledge of God, the full like the ultimate knowledge about Hashem?
The ultimate understanding of God. Right? Yeah. Really understand him, we'll say transcended from the physical world. Because our understanding as humans is limited to our physical body, our form. We have 5 senses. And with these 5 senses, we build up a picture of the entire world around us. Right? So we're able to see. We have eyes, they sense light. They sense the electromagnetic waves. However, the visible light, what does that mean, visible light? It means the light that we are able to view, to see, is a very limited on the spectrum. Besides that, you know, for us, it starts with red and ends with violet, right? Anything on that spectrum. Everything else, which is maybe 90% of the spectrum, is called either infrared, infrared being lower energy than red, or ultraviolet, higher than violet. We only see anything in between, which is very, very narrow. We have managed to develop all sorts of devices that can detect infrared and ultraviolet. But we cannot perceive, we cannot imagine things any other color than the colors that we are familiar with. Right? It's like someone who is blind from birth. He's never seen, ever. Can you explain to him what the color green looks like? So if he's never seen it, he can't imagine it. All right, so we have 5 senses, and we know there are more. There are more ways to perceive the earth. For instance, not only do we have 5 senses, our sight is limited, right, to that spectrum of from red to violet. But even so, we can only see straight. Some animals or insects, they have eyes on the sides, and they see 360. We can't even imagine what it would be like to perceive the world visually 360 degrees all the way around us. How about sonar and radar? There are other animals that have these senses, let's say bats and dolphins. But we can't think in those terms. We can only think in the terms of the 5 senses that we have. And those 5 senses themselves are limited. We can't smell the way dogs smell, right? We can't hear the way dogs or other creatures hear. We can't see the way eagles can see. We have 5 senses, limited senses. So we're limited in the amount of senses that we have. Basically, we're limited in our perception of the world, in our perception of the universe. And we can't think in terms other than that. So God is telling Moshe, he says to him, man is composed of 2 things. It's true, we have an intellect, and we're able to process information, to imagine, to think, to discover, and to go beyond. However, our perception is limited by our physical form, our bodies. And there is no way you can possibly perceive God if you're only limited to these senses. And you're trying to understand God divorced of physical form. It says man can only perceive through physical form. It's our eyes and our ears that allow us to perceive. We can't perceive without it. So how can you perceive of a universe or of an existence that has no physical form? Is that understood?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, it may seem a bit nonsense, but I have a question. Moses wanted to get more knowledge of God. Since he was a man of such high knowledge in his days compared to now, how could he have wanted to
Sorry,
have
what
even
God?
more? Moses has a lot of knowledge and understanding about Hashem, right? He
Right.
asked Hashem to show him his face. For his days, that was high.
What was his high? We'll see. We're gonna get to that now.
Okay, but I want to understand why did he wanted to get even more from Hashem? Why did he wanted to see?
Why did he want to get even more knowledge of God?
Yeah, because he was, in his days, he was one of those who had the highest knowledge, if I understood good.
Right. Not just in his days, but forever.
Okay, well, even more so.
It says your knowledge of God is your closeness to God.
Yeah.
We'll study that later, right? So the better understanding you have of God, it's like the closer you are to him, the more you live. We'll put it that way. We'll see also that even life is a relative term. It's not either you're alive or dead. Your life is a function of your knowledge of God.
Yeah, that's true. I understand.
And eternal life is having this knowledge of God. And the more of it that you have, the more eternal life you have. Right? So,
Sammy,
One
yes.
more thing, Sammy,
Is this-
before I go. Just one more thing. Okay, he was one that has more knowledge than anyone else. As far as I understand, God have given us a limit of knowledge. Higher than that, we can't go. So then,
Right.
could you explain me that?
And Moshe reached that limit.
And he wanted more.
He wanted more, and God explained to him that being an earthly creature, it is impossible to have more.
Okay.
Someone else wanted to ask? Was it?
yeah, me. I was going to ask about what you said about loving God and getting closer to God. Is it based on Rambam saying that you cannot love what you don't know?
Right? Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
the
that was-
second chapter. The next chapter is it's called the love of God, the mitzvah of loving God, which is basically the mitzvah of acquiring knowledge of God, which is basically acquiring life. Really, from God's perspective, we'll get more into this later, not today. From God's perspective, the concept of knowledge, the concept of love, the concept of life, they are all the same thing. We perceive them as different things, but really life, knowledge, and love is all really the same thing, coming down from God.
That's very cool. Thank you, Sammy.
Interesting.
Sorry?
I said interesting. Very
So
interesting.
we'll get to that more later on.
Okay.
So what did God tell Moshe? He said, "V'hodi'o baruch hu ma shelo yada adam lefanav velo yida me'acharav." He says he still informed Moshe. He still taught Moshe more than anyone has ever known before, and more than anyone will ever understand afterwards. Meaning, the maximum amount of knowledge that man can have, God gave to Moshe. עד שהשיג מאמיתת הימצאו, דבר שנפרד הקדוש ברוך הוא בדעתו משאר הנמצאים, כמו שהתפרד אחד מן האנשים שראה אחוריו, והשיג כל גופו ומלבושו בדעתו משאר האנשים. Okay, so I'll explain that. It says, well, Moshe's request was to be able to identify God face to face, so to speak. Meaning, beyond any doubt, with absolute certainty, you're facing your friend, you know it's him, there's no question about it. Right? Says that's impossible for man. Man cannot ever possibly reach that level of understanding of God. However, the knowledge that Moshe received was similar to reading a person's body language, where you see someone walking and you're able to say, oh, that's probably my friend, right? I can kind of identify him. Or, you know what, I'll explain it this way too. Someone you don't know, many times, just by observing them, observing the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they behave, it could give you a lot of clues to who this person is. What kind of a person is it, right? You see like a teenager sometimes, very loud, walking around, with his chest up and everything. You say, okay, this is like an arrogant teenager. See someone always walking like that. So, okay, this guy, he doesn't really have any, very low self-esteem. See a person that's, always yelling, this guy, there's something troubling him. He's always angry. So there's a lot you can learn by observing a person's behavior. By observing the way a person dresses, by how he takes care of himself, by how he manages his household, by how neat he is, how organized, how dirty, right? You can learn a lot about a person just by observing him, without even seeing his face. So it says, the knowledge that Moshe received from God was comparable to this kind of knowledge. Say it's not direct knowledge, it's inferred knowledge. So God showed Moshe certain things that allowed Moshe to infer certain things about God. Is that understood? It's like a second-hand inferred knowledge, and it's not direct. By the way, in this, if we're talking about code terms, right, like yad and regel, so code terms for direct knowledge would be panim, seeing God face to face, and inferred knowledge, the code term for them is achor, back, the backside. All right, so, and he says about this knowledge, the Torah hinted when it said, and you shall see my behind, or from behind, ufanai lo yireu, my face cannot be seen or shall not be seen. Does anybody have any idea what this, what did God show Moshe? What was this inferred knowledge that Moshe was able to receive from God's teaching? What did God teach him? What did he show him?
The Torah.
Shown him the Torah. Okay. Any other suggestions?
Acharit Hayamim.
The end of days. So you're saying you showed him how history plays out. Okay, interesting. Anything else? So there's a midrash on this pasuk. It says, "V'ra'ita kachorai ufanai lo yirau." Right? You should see my from behind. However, my face shall not be seen. And then it says, "V'anochi avir kol tuvi al panecha." He says, I am going to pass before you all of my tuvi, all of my great stuff, my good stuff. V'karati b'shem Hashem, and I shall also call out in the name of God. I'll say my name. So what is it? So the Midrash says, what is this? V'ani avir kol tuvi al panecha. What does it mean? All my good stuff, all my goods, I will show you. And the Midrash says, kol tuvi, all my good, is anything God said, v'yomer Elohim kitov. Anything that God said, and behold, this is good. Okay, so I'm going to ask again. What did God show Moshe to bring him to this highest level of human understanding of God? Inferred knowledge. Does anyone want to suggest something in light of this midrash?
Maybe
No.
the future of the Jewish people, the mitzvahs of the Jewish people.
What did God say? Behold, this is good. It says, "Vayomer Elohim kitov." I'll give you a hint. We read it in the Beit Knesset a few weeks ago. In fact, we even read it on Simchat Torah and the following Shabbat.
Mankind, I'm free to say it.
The first chapter of Bereshit keeps repeating at the end of every day, or almost every day. And God said, "Behold, this is good." Vayomer Elohim ki tov. He created light. He said, "Oh, this is good." He created the waters. He separated the waters. Oh, behold, this is good. Right?
So he saw that
But
proceeds
he
from
also said
organization.
it's not good for man to be alone. That?
Right? So that's what the Midrash is saying. It says, "V'ani avir kol tuvi." It says, all my goodness, all my good stuff is what? Is the entire creation of the world.
Yeah.
He says, you want to understand me and my ways? Look at what I do. Look at what I did. Understand how I did it. Basically, he's saying Moshe was the greatest astrophysicist in the world. He saw the creation of the moons, the stars, all of biology. He understood how all of botany. He understood how the world works. And from that, he's able to understand how God behaves. He says, but there's more. He says, right? I'm going to bring forth before you, show you an image of the creation of the universe. It says, V'karati b'shem Hashem, and I'm going to call out in my name. And then he goes on to also detail the 13 midot of God. It says, El Rahum, V'hanun, Erech Hapayim, right? God is merciful, right? He's not quick to react to a person's bad behavior. He gives him time to maybe do teshuvah, right? He's not hasty. He says, also learn these from me. He says, understand science, understand the world I created, understand how I lead this world, how I provide in this world, right? How I make sure all sorts of different animals and creatures have a way of getting, their food, their sustenance. Understand how I lead the world with mercy. Says that is the highest level of knowledge of God that a person can receive. Because we can't perceive God directly. We can only infer from his actions. And the only actions that we can witness or study is the physical world around us. It says, V'ra'ita et ahurai ufanai lo yirau. And that's the meaning of that pasuk. Since we have already established that God has no physical form, יתבאר שלא יראו ולא אחד ממאורות הגוף. So since God has no physical form, we've already established that, then we can understand that nothing that happens to physical forms is applicable to God, such as lo hibur velo pirud. There's no addition and no subtraction. There's no dividing God, and there's no putting parts together to form a God. Velo makom velo midah, right? He's non-local. He's not based in any place. Locality is only related to the physical universe, which was created by God. So he has no place and he has no size. He has no ascension and no descension. There's no up and down. velo yamin velo simol, and not no right and no left, velo panim velo achor. And we said, you saw me from behind, but not my face. He says he has no front and back. So even when it says you can see me from behind, but you can't see me from the front, that's just code terms for, in this case, how we understood it was a direct perception of God or an inferred understanding of God. So these are all just parables. They're all mishanim. Velo yeshiva velo amida. God doesn't sit and he doesn't stand. Ve'eno matzui bazeman. Right? And he has no existence within time. Ad she'elo reshit ve'acharit u'minyan shanim. Right? So then you can't also associate a beginning of a timely beginning to God, or an end, or a lifespan. Ve'eno mishtane, and God doesn't change. She'eno davar she'yigrom lo shinui, because nothing can change God. God existed before, right? I'm using the word before. It's not really before. God existed without anything. Nothing affects him. Everything is his creation. Everything is dependent on him. He's not dependent on anything. Not only that, but change can only take place over time. And if time is irrelevant to God, then change is irrelevant to God. So God isn't really happy and at one time and sad at another. God is God, and that's it.
And therefore he is one.
And therefore,
And
he's
therefore
one,
he
yes. Therefore, he's one, exactly. ואין לו מוות ולא חיים כחיי הגוף החי. Says he has no death and he has no life. What does that mean he has no life? He says he has no life כחיי הגוף החי. Right? His life isn't comparable to that of a living creature. His life, we just call it life, but it's nothing that we are familiar with. ולא sichlut ולא חוכמה כחוכמת האיש החכם. Right? And he has no ignorance. It says, and he has no intelligence. It says, like the intelligence of man, right? Wisdom or intelligence or knowledge of God, we just call it knowledge. It's, relative to him, it's something else completely. It's not something that we can compare to. Velo shena velo hakisa, right? And he has no sleep and he doesn't wake up. Velo kas velo schok. And he has no anger and he has no happiness. Velo simcha velo asmut, right? And he doesn't get sad and he doesn't get also like jolly. Velo shtika velo dibur ki dibur ha'adam, right? And he has no silence and he has no speech like the speech of man. God speaks. He's not silent, right? He has no silence. He has a communication, but it's not like the communication of man. It's not through sound. How does God communicate? Well, we'll get to that later in one of our later classes.
to the sound of creation.
Sorry?
To the sound of creation.
The song of creation, okay.
To
So
the
even the song, it's a song, it's a harmony. That's what it means. It's a harmony. But it's not like a harmony that it's not an audible harmony. Because it doesn't spread through interference in the air. And this is what the Hachamim say, or when they say, and this is what they mean when they say en lemala, right up there, even up there, is just a way for us to picture it. He's not really up there because he's not anywhere. Lo en lemala, lo yeshiva, velo amida, right up there is no sitting or standing, lo orif velo ipui, right? There's no like this way and this way. There's no up and down. There is no space. Veho'il ve'adavar kachu, right? And since this is the way it is, that you can't associate any physical attribute to God's existence, כל הדברים הללו וכיוצא בהן שנאמרו בתורה ובדברי הנביאים, הכל משל ומליצה הם. Right? All of these terms that we'll find in the Torah and in the books of the prophets about God standing up, or God sitting on a throne, or even having a throne, right? All these are allegories. And these allegories have, it's not just a mashal, it's a melissa. They have some sort of deeper meaning to them, that if you really want to understand God, you need to investigate and study and contemplate and meditate in order to understand. כמו שנאמר, as it says, יושב בשמיים ישחק, right? It says God sitting in the skies is laughing. כי עשוני בהבליהם, they angered me with their foolishness. כאשר שש השם, right? As God rejoices, וכיוצא בהן, right? In all of these terms, על הכל אמרו חכמים, דיברה התורה כלשון בני אדם. On all of this, the Chachamim say the Torah spoke in the language of man. They spoke a language that man can relate to. וכן הוא אומר, האותי הם מכעיסים, says also, says in Jeremiah, says, you think they are angering me? הרי הוא אומר, אני אדוני לא שניתי. Says I, God, do not change. So, are they angering me? He says, you think they are angering me? He says, there's nothing that we can do that can really bring forth the rage of God. So what does it mean when God is angry? Something needs to be understood. He says, I, God, do not change. לא שניתי. ואילו היה פעמים כועס ופעמים שמח, היה משתנה, right? And if he was sometimes angry and sometimes happy, then he would be changing. וכל הדברים האלו אינם מצויים אלא על הגופים האפלים השפלים, שוכני בתי חומר אשר בעפר יסודם. Right? And all of these things, happiness and madness and being angry and up and down and all that, those are only applicable to physical forms from the slowly part of creation, right? The physical universe. And we know this, all these emotions, they come from our chemical composition, the chemicals in our body. They're all based on our physical form, and therefore none of it is applicable to God. Aval hu baruch hu, right? Behi, blessed be He. He is above, He is transcendent to all of this. And this is the end of the first chapter. And if anybody has any questions, insights, ideas they would like to share, please feel free to do so.
I just wanted to say that you said that as Moses got the derived knowledge of Hashem, then he was he had the ultimate understanding of our physical world.
So sorry, could you?
So he was like he had the ultimate knowledge of the physical world, because he got the derived knowledge of Hashem.
Right.
No, I'm sorry, I forget the word that you use. Not the direct knowledge, but the referred knowledge.
Okay, yeah.
So then that gives a deeper meaning to that he is Rabbeinu Moshe Rabbeinu. He's the
Right.
teacher of teachers. So he will be
Rabbeinu
able.
is
He
also
would
the
have.
master. We'll see in another place the Rambam refers to him Rabbeinu v'Rabban shel kol hanevi'im. Says, and the master of all the prophets. Because even prophecy, knowledge, the knowledge that comes to prophets is derived from Moshe's knowledge.
Mm-hmm. It gives a deeper meaning to him being the teacher of prophets and also the teacher of teachers.
Right, exactly.
Since he had all of this knowledge, he would have been able to teach a lot of different teachers, different things.
Right, if you
Or
remember,
different subjects,
if you
like
go
all of the
back to
professions
the
that we have
beginning of
today.
the previous course, right? The beginning of the previous course, we spoke about how Moshe taught the Torah. Passed it down. There was like 70 people there, and the entire nation as well. And they all in turn became teachers, right? Passing on the knowledge. Very nice. Very nice.
Sami,
Yes.
something I have heard of learned from a rabbi that, or from more than one person, that we are all parts of the explosion of Adam.
Sorry, we are all what?
Parts of bodies of Adam. His body exploded, we all came a part of that. And those men of higher knowledge, which I would think that Moshe is one of them, they is not part of that. They came down from, I guess, from heaven. Is that so?
Well, I'm not familiar with this. However, you have to think of it like a midrash, like an allegory. And not that Adam's Harishon actually blew up and everyone came from it, but that we all have a piece of Adam's physical form, which could be understood with our, understanding of science today. We all have Adam's DNA in us.
Yeah.
And
I understand that.
along with the DNA and the genetic composition comes also our way of thinking.
Very interesting.
All of these things that you ever hear that sound fantastic and let's say not not realistic in like the way that we're used to understanding the world, it's probably because it's not, and it's a midrash that needs to be understood.
Okay.
Anything
Very
else?
interesting.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So, in science, math, physics, biology, etc., can we say in collective level we are also getting this knowledge of how creatures are made and the process?
So you're saying because today, if I understand you correctly, today, there isn't one person who knows everything, but collectively as mankind, we have a lot of people who understand biology very well, and a lot of people understand physics very well. So do we collectively possess a higher knowledge of God? Is that your question? Did I understand you right?
It may not be the same like how Moses understood with Kedusha, like holiness, but if that's the knowledge about how our universe is created and about the creatures, in a way, are these knowledges or knowledge is quite, can we say it's a bit like what it was about?
Sorry, could you? I couldn't hear you too well.
Often people say the science is secular subjects.
Right.
You see, this is in a
I
way.
think those people are wrong. And we will see in the next chapter that is actually a mitzvah to study science. And studying science is a way to get closer to God. And say the Maimonidean take is there is no such thing as secular studies. There's the study of wisdom and knowledge. And we are obligated to study it as much as we can, to whatever level we're capable of.
What about
And we see from here that Moshe's understanding comes from science. He didn't study Torah then. There was no Torah then to be studied. What did people study? You said the yeshiva of Shem and Eved, right? Noah had 3 sons. One of them was Shem. Shem established a yeshiva in Jerusalem. And Eved, the grandfather of Abraham, was also part of that yeshiva, later on. So what did they study in that yeshiva? Right? The Torah wasn't given yet. So what did they study? Well, we see later on, there's someone, he's the king of Jerusalem, right? Says what was his name? Melchizedek Melech Shalem, the king of Jerusalem. Says Vehu Kohen Le'el Elyon, and he is a priest of the high God, meaning God. Says Le'el Elyon. It says Baruch El Elyon. When he comes to praise Abraham, he says to Abraham, "Blessed be God, this high God, the Almighty God." Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz, he who acquires the heavens and the earth. So the yeshiva, the studying then was all secular. What did they have to study? He says, Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. He says they study about the heavens and the earth. That was the knowledge they had accessible to them, and that's what made them the heads of the yeshiva. Today we also have Torah to study. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And
I can hear.
but some people, very religious people, aren't they opposing those subjects, but just the secular environment itself, not the subject? Like ultra-Orthodox, these Haredi people.
Right. I disagree with them.
What do they think about this secular subject?
What do they think about that? No, yeah, they say not to study it. They say just study Torah. They're afraid that if you study secular subjects, I don't even like calling it secular subject. If you study knowledge and science, then it'll take you away from God. In my opinion, it's wrong. The only thing it'll take you away from is their yeshivot, because their own teachers don't know any of these sciences. So I have a lot to say on the matter, just maybe not here.
Okay, thank you.
Not here. Very wise.
Thank you, Sammy. Till next week.
Oh wait,
Thank
Sammy,
you.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
If God has no form, then how come it says in Genesis, "Let us make man in our image"?
Okay, that's a good question.
Spiritual.
We will get to that.
Okay.
My question is, when God says that, who is he talking to?
The angels, maybe? I don't know. I heard from Rabbi maybe the angels he was talking to.
Right. Okay. So first of all, God never says let us make man in our image. He says, "Na'aseh adam b'salmenu kidmutenu." Right? Image is the translated word.
Okay.
All right. So he says, "We'll make man in our senim," whatever that means, and in our demut, which maybe could be image, but it's more like in our likeness. Meaning there is some sort of aspect, when God created man, there's some sort of aspect of man that that God gave to us that is in common with God and whoever God was talking to when he said, let us make man in our image and our likeness. But that image isn't the physical form.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I have two things that got triggered when you said that, Sami. So one thing, and this might be completely wrong. So a king usually talks about himself in a third person or in a plural way.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing, with likeness, could that be connected to, so animals, they have a nefesh, but they don't have an neshama. But we as humans, we have an neshama. Is that
Right.
somewhere in the ballpark?
We will talk about the terms nefesh and neshama, and in Maimonides' language, they're a bit different than what we're used to, or at least he applies the terms differently. But we're gonna have like at least a class, maybe even two, focused just on that stuff. So I'll answer you then.
It's okay.
Yeah. As they say,
I can
to be
wait.
continued.
Yes.
Yeah, anything else?
I have a question. I'm not sure how relevant it is, but this keeps coming up in different classes on here that the generations keep going on and we keep becoming less and less holy.
Right.
So, but I guess, I don't know, we transform the physical world more and more and more with each generation. So I don't know. Yeah.
So there is a concept called Yeridat Hadorot, right? Generations, demise or diminish. Were you in my previous course?
No, I was not.
All right. So the previous course we were talking about the evolution of the oral law, and we saw that there were eras where there was a lot of wisdom, and there were eras with less wisdom, right? And that's really what the Chachamim mean when they say Yeridat Hadorot. However, we also saw that it's not a line going down; it goes up and down and up and down. And what enables wisdom and what causes it to diminish? And we saw that when we are being persecuted, well, then the students can't study, they're running for their lives, they can't, really sit down and focus, and then like the light of the Torah slowly gets dimmer, the wisdom of God goes down. But then sometimes there's a generation, and maybe this can go on for a while even, where we have security and we have peace or relative peace. And then, then the students come back to the yeshiva and they study and they explore and they further develop. For instance, if it was always like a linear line going downwards, then eventually there's not going to be any wisdom left. However, our prophecies is that at the end of days, that the entire world will be filled with the knowledge of God. So how does that play out? Well, we know at the end of times, there's going to be no more wars, times of security and safety and peace. The past 75 years, right? Yeah, we've had our wars and we've had our troubles, but overall, we've had some pretty good, peaceful times that, we're able to gather. Not only that, but we have Zoom now. So even when times are rough, we're able to sit down and gather and study and educate ourselves. So I don't think that today there's less knowledge and wisdom of the world and of God than the past 2,000 years. I think we're actually in a much better place than we were for the past, at least the past 1,000 years, maybe even the past 2,000 years. Not only that, but back then, having wise men was, there were some very, very wise men, but there weren't too many of them. Today, you have a lot of intellectuals, a lot of wise intellectuals. You also have some morons in universities and stuff, but you also have a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and it's also very freely accessible to anybody who wants to study more. Does that answer your question?
No, not really. But kind of, yeah. And I did take your last course. Yeah.
Okay.
But
what bothers you?
I don't know. I just keep hearing it again and again, and yeah. But hearing that it's not linear, that makes more sense.
All right. I'll take it. Anything else? All right then. Okay, so I guess I'll see you all hopefully next week. And have a good evening.
Thank you so much.